Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the noontime Friday News and Politics show, and we're going to kick off with former state representative, former deputy secretary of state, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman, to give us Big View.
Kate, I have to start saying a happy holiday to everybody, just in case you won't be around next week. I am playing around doing Jane Jacobs stuff recently, talking to some people about a Ferris wheel for Providence, Rhode Island. Talk to you some more about that in January. Talking about 2 or 3 other things, including an Olympic swimming pool for the 180,000 residents of Providence. Talk to you about that in February. Now, I would like to ask the governor and the mayor and the treasurer of Rhode Island if they would start some activity to do something about the Superman building. Now, I brought my notes because I wanted to mention a couple things. High Rock Development owns it, and it's obvious they're treating the Superman building as if kryptonite is in it. That's how dynamically they're not engaged in doing something about this building. Now, the word is it'll cost at least $70 million to turn it into a first-class facility, and it basically is not usable without doing that. It could cost $100 million, to be candid and honest, because I hate cost overruns. So how do we get this 1928 awkwardly fantastic building restored and back in use? It's beginning to be an eyesore. Homeless people sleep in the entrances on Westminster every morning of the week. I don't know why they don't do it on the other side, on Kennedy, but they don't. So, you with me? We've had 3 major corporations, including CVS, take serious looks at this building and say it's really kind of, this is interesting because I watch it, I can see it out this window. And it's built in 5 different parts, and it gets smaller as you go up. And it's awkward. No corporation can figure out how to make use of it as a corporate building. So we've gone through that. Let's get over it. How about we get the state, Governor, you listening? Commerce, you listening? Why don't we get the state to take the first 3 floors? 3rd floor for commercial, let's say. Maybe for commerce when their lease is up. The 1st floor for an archives. Massachusetts has a fabulous archives with 100,000+ visitors a year. Secretary of State, are you listening? We have an archives with 7 or 8 visitors a day. Those are old numbers from 2017. It could be 10 visitors a day. It's not exciting. It's not exciting. Do you know that great banking hall in the Superman building would make a display area that tourists would come to, that school children around the state could come to? It would be dramatic to do that. So that could be the state's part, and they get the best 2 floors. Then the city of Providence could step in and take floor number 4 and 5. City of Providence's archives needs a home. Something fabulous, the 4th floor of Superman building. Then, so those 2 entities could do that. And then here's my suggestion, that someone, whether it is the treasurer of Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner, who's a very capable man, or the governor, to sit down with the 10 largest corporations in Rhode Island. It's a 28-story building, and ask them to take 2 each. And they may just break even when they're done restoring it and using it. They may not make a lot of money. They may use it for conference areas, who knows. And then way up top, Liz Chase and others have recommended on more than one occasion we put in 4 or 5 stories of high-end housing. Now, I think that the state housing could get involved and put in a floor or 2 of housing for older people. Leadership. Someone needs to take the leadership. And I think the governor or the treasurer or even the mayor of Providence, if they did this, they'd get a lot of kudos. They'd get thank you greetings.
Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome in my next guest, GoLocal columnist Bob Wickham.
Hello, Kate.
Thanks for joining us to cap off the week here and talk all about news and politics. And the big news last night, finally at City Council, after much ado, the City Council overrode Mayor Jorge Alorza's veto of the variance. Now, this is simply the height variance for Jason Fain's proposed 46-story tower.
That's the crucial thing, is the height. I mean, that's the distinguishing thing about it. I should chime in. We don't really know what the final design is.
We absolutely do not.
They've
I mean,
got
this is
the ziggurat thing, which I think is very entertaining, actually. But the final one, I don't know. Well, I think what this does suggest, the mayor will not be allowed to be the architect on it. I wouldn't be surprised if our old friend Friedrich St. Florian has something to do with the final design.
Maybe have some input, because it does have to go through the design review. I mean, this was a big hurdle.
Yeah.
Obviously, the opponents had come out en masse. Mary Kay Harris was the big deciding vote.
I know, Kay. Under tremendous pressure. She almost seemed in tears about it. And it was actually more lopsided than I thought it would. Were you surprised? I was a little bit surprised. It was maybe I'm just speaking my
there
ignorance.
was some interesting commentary after the fact that it was, if you know you have the votes, don't filibuster your own vote. But I think that Councilwoman Harris really felt the need to explain her vote, because she was under
her for that.
She was under so much pressure from both sides, and I think that's why she brought out the.
They didn't want a $300 million thing. Yeah, they get tax breaks as everybody else does. I think the more interesting thing, if it does get built, who will live there? Will there be a lot of flight capitalists there who aren't there most of the time? They just want a property, a kind of money laundering operation. Will there be a lot of parents of Brown and RISD students who buy places, maybe even buy places for their
college
kids?
wealth industrial complex.
Yeah, the college industrial, the Ivy League industrial complex.
Well, I'll tell you this.
We don't know that, but it'll go up in if it gets built, maybe 3 years, something like that. We don't know what anything's going to look like in 3 years.
Gosh, no, not looking.
I do know this broadcast will be in Serbo-Croatian. It's part of GoLocal's outreach.
We'll have it in 100 different languages.
That's right.
No, just this week it was announced residential properties, a team there had just closed on the largest sale this year of a 2-bedroom condo in Water Place. So, there's some talk about what the market is, is it cooling, is it not? But there was just a big sale from a 2-bedroom.
Cooling, apparently, it's cooling in New York fast. It might be part of the tax law. It might have something to do with it, which is against the Northeast in California. And there's some cooling going on in Boston. The New York cooling is quite clear.
Well, we'll see. We'll continue to follow the next steps for the Fain Tower. Let's talk a little bit about the economy here in Rhode Island, Bob. I had the opportunity to have House Finance Chair Marvin Abney in yesterday. At the latest, about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, House Finance met. Projected $42 million shortfall for the current fiscal year, a projected $112. I mean, that one, looking out to FY20, can change very quickly. But it seems like we're always sort of in this boat.
Yeah, is this due to a slowing economy around here? This sort of a somewhat sluggish economy? I'd like to know more of the reasons for that. Is this overspending? bad budgeting? Do they need new computers? Maybe we should hire the people who did the benefits thing. That was exciting.
No, that was one of the things we talked about was state government and the need for departments to look at their spending.
This gets to something I want to. I put a little item about this in my little column about Springfield, Massachusetts, which they went under a control board in 2004, and they've really made huge progress. They have a good mayor. They know where the money is going in each department very clearly, and I think there may be some lessons there. Springfield, boring old Springfield, famous for two things now. Casino is the birthplace of who? Dr. Seuss.
Birthplace of Dr.
Seuss.
That was the birthplace of basketball.
And basketball. And Dr. Seuss much more important.
Dr. Seuss, basketball.
And other infantile games, right. So anyway, I think there's some lessons. People could look it up. I think I found this in Governing magazine.
Do you think it could be applied to the state level?
I think state level and city level.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
You have to read
thoughtful piece.
Read it on Sunday. One of the things that I talked about with the chairman as well was clearly they'll be taking a look at the Rhode Island Promise program. Of course, when the governor introduced it, it was, there were no results. You couldn't see
based
where it was
on the Tennessee thing, wasn't it?
Very similar to the Tennessee thing. But now we're getting some numbers. But as GoLocal reported, they counted the entire cohort of entering students as their Rhode Island Promise students.
This we should tell everybody. That's CCRI.
CCRI,
right?
yes.
Yeah. What we used to call junior college. Right.
But they didn't break out who was getting the free college and then how they were performing. Were they meeting expectations? It was, Chairman Abney made it very clear that he wants real numbers, not the entire, they're all our promised students. It'll be very interesting to see when the governor, if she does propose the expansion that she had promised during the campaign.
That will be very interesting, and how she can put this in national comparative context. My own view on this is it's very early. These things, like fixing education in general, you've got to kind of run through the boa constrictor. It takes a while to digest.
Move it through.
And I don't think we're going to really have that clear idea of how well this program is working for a couple of years. I'm not defending the governor or attacking the. I'm just saying these things take a lot of time.
So, do you think that the expansion should be put on hold while we wait and see
No, I think you keep going and give it a couple of years. I think it's an exciting idea. The central problem that it's not the taxes are too high. The central problem, we don't have enough qualified people. That's the central problem. I've been told this by business executives back when I was the business editor, and that's the crucial thing. It's not taxes. Everybody everywhere whines about taxes. And the taxes should be streamlined. They should be made clearer. They probably could be made fair. We have a property tax problem here, which has to be adjusted. But
no, education clearly is always the top of the list. And I think it was after we had you in last week, we had Neil Steinberg from the Rhode Island Foundation. And if you saw, they convened a group of stakeholders to look at a 10-year
steak
plan.
Eaters, maybe.
Steak eaters.
In Providence, many fine restaurants.
Steak eaters, stakeholders. He said, it needs 10 years. And my question to him is, why can't you just grab that Massachusetts blueprint and not go through the
we know it works. And I have watched that. That took a long while, too, to fully kick in. But when that started under Weld, I think, and then under Republican and Democratic governors, it's been pressed, and they've now, I would never have believed this. Massachusetts now has arguably the best public schools in the country, which is extraordinary because it's a complex urban state, very heterogeneous, and yet all over the state, obviously the best public schools tend to be in the affluent suburbs of Boston, but still all over the state, poor towns, rich towns, and so on. There's been major improvement. Whatever the demography of the locality in the school district, and there's clearly a great model there. The other thing, besides the fact it's a good model, is that we, in the long run, in Rhode Island, have to follow what they do because they're so much bigger and richer. In the end, our policies, while there's a lag time, are made in Beacon Hill, not Smith Hill. Well, that's the way it should be because this shouldn't be a state.
The Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts at the time when these reforms were implemented is actually on that panel here with the Rhode Island Foundation.
Right.
So I guess
Neil hired him then?
Neil brought him in and said, we need to pick your brain. No, Neil was good. He had plenty of answers for when, do we really need 10 years? But he said that's the goal and we can work back. And that's not to preclude advancements being made day in, day out.
Yeah,
I think the question is we're the highest, we're up there with Mass. past, we're top 10 in the country for per pupil spending.
Right.
Are there going to be suggestions that say, taxpayers, we need more, but when we've already been spending so much
Or
and getting...
how can this be changed in terms of labor contracts and more flexibility? And should the charter school movement be expanded? I mean, my friend Ed Acorn over the Providence Journal is always talking of charter schools. That may be part of the package, but I think major improvements must be made every year.
Yes.
But we cannot expect a huge, triumphant Nobel Peace Prize triumph.
Overnight, no.
Overnight.
No,
It's gonna
not.
take, I mean, you figure K through 12, that's a lot of grades right there. Then 2 years for junior college or community college, and then 2 more years for college, and then a vocational element. So I think we're talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
But that's no excuse not to keep
Exactly.
pushing hard. Whoever gets elected next time around.
Let's talk about another big issue facing the state, and I believe you said you're going to write about it,
Yeah.
the fate of Hasbro.
Yeah, Hasbro. My concern about Hasbro is the politicians could be jumping all over themselves to give stuff to Hasbro. Well, what we should be doing is stuff that we should be doing: infrastructure, education, tax streamlining, regulations that helps everybody. So what we do, this happens in every state and city in the country. They go after the headline name, the sexy name. That's one of the few really famous companies that's based here. And then give them the stars, the moon, and the sky. But everybody else has to pay for it, so they become less competitive.
Part of the problem, too, is the fact that it does reside...
It's sexy.
It's sexy, and it coincides with the fate of Pawtucket, which,
Right.
I mean, it's the perfect storm.
You know what Pawtucket should be? Pawtucket should be pressing for more and more rail service. They should make a big deal about the new railroad station.
And I think they're trying.
Higher speed rail, and then Pawtucket can become part of Boston, basically.
Put it on the line.
Cheaper place to live. They still have wonderful old lofts and stuff, and sort of an adjunct to Boston, and which they could do if they get faster and more frequent train service. Commercially, I don't see any big company staying in or moving in Pawtucket. I don't think it's
Hasbro has its own set of issues, as we've seen. Their performance by lieu of the clothing.
You mentioned Amazon. Amazon's going to get in the toy business.
Amazon's getting in the toy business, and the Hasbro stock just went, plummeted, even just talk of this happening. So
I mean, it's an entertainment company now too. It's not really a manufacturer. It's an entertainment company.
A lot of online.
So what do you think? 2 words: Southern California, or maybe New York City.
No, that's a lot of they have talked about the West Coast.
So I mean, I love Hasbro. I've had friends over there over the years. I've covered it, but I just hope they don't give away the store and then send everybody else the bill.
So while we still have you here in studio and you've got some notes,
before the police show up.
What else can we expect?
Okay, well, I talk about Hasbro, as you know, and I talk about this. Speaking of innovation stuff. The Innovation Center that's setting up in Newport, which I think it could work pretty well because they've got the Naval Undersea Warfare Center.
A lot of brain power.
War College, Raytheon, a lot of small, medium-sized engineering and tech companies. And I think conceivably, especially because Newport's such an interesting place to live, that could be, in the fullness of time, be a lot bigger than the 33,000 square foot center they're setting up. At the same time, I also comment about how innovation is overrated. Sometimes innovation doesn't make things better, it makes things worse, like a cell phone. Well, we all have our cell phones, and they're very handy in an emergency, but it also breeds attention deficit disorder.
The decline of humanity
as we know
as
about social media. We know about a catastrophe that could be
these
for
laws
national security.
Of unintended consequences, that is for sure.
So I talk about that, and I talk about water pollution. As you know, the Trump administration wants to weaken the water regulations. I sort of make a connection there. We have wonderful marshes. The Providence Journal, give them credit, they did a nice piece about the marsh grass down the Narrow River. Well, if they loosen some of these rules, it's going to kill some more marshes, as the marshes are going underwater anyway, increasingly. So I don't like that. So I want people to chime in on that. That's something that the Trump administration can almost do on its own because it's, I believe, a regulation, not a law.
Okay.
And who wants this? Guess who? Agribusiness, the coal miners, and so on. And let me see. Do we have time for Otzi Charles?
Otzi Charles,
great socialite. She died at age 98, I think. And
GoLocal had was first to report.
GoLocal broke the story. She's one of the last kind of the doyens, the queens of high society. And the world of the movie High Society from the 1956 set in Newport, with music, words and music by the poet laureate of that crowd, who was Cole Porter, obviously. So she is, by all accounts, a nice lady, resilient lady. But the passing of her just reminds me of the old WASP who said he's declining it. New people are coming in, Silicon Valley money, and so on. And I say, well, the new crowd, they're more informal, they're more impatient, their manners aren't as good, but they're less bigoted.
Okay,
So,
hitting the nail on the head.
That's right.
Well, Bob, as always, appreciate you taking the time to come here into the studio. We'll see you next
soon.
week, and we'll be back with our next guest here, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the Noontime News and Politics show. And the big news out of Roger Williams University this week, the next head of the Latino Policy Institute, Marcela Betancourt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me.
We've been waiting to hear who was going to replace Gabriela, and you are so hands-on in the community with the experience that you bring to the table. North Providence resident, working with the Providence Housing Authority, the Central Falls Schools, the Economic Policy Institute. So let's introduce you and your background to folks, and we'll then talk a little bit about what lies ahead for you at Roger Williams.
Sure. So my big portion of my professional life has focused in housing and affordable housing. I worked for the Providence Housing Authority right after college. I've focused in project management and grant writing. I went on to work for NeighborWorks up in Woonsocket. It was a wonderful opportunity. Then I switched a little bit and went to the American Civil Liberties Union, where I was introduced first to hands-on policy and how it works at the State House. And that's one of the first places where I understood and was able to compare some of the work that you do in housing with the policies that are actually passed. So within the last couple of years, I focused a lot of my work back in the places that feel like home, such as Central Falls, which is where I'm originally from, in the Housing Authority, which is really important to me. So I'm excited and proud that the Latino Policy Institute will be my next home, where I'm hoping to kind of combine all of the love and knowledge and resources that I've acquired over the last few years.
Well, very good, and we look forward to seeing what comes out of the Latino Policy Institute, because so much of that research is aimed at stakeholders here in the state to have an understand of the landscape, of the issues. And we talked a little bit about this facing the Latinx community, and we'll talk after if we think that the Latino Policy Institute will be changed to the Latinx Policy Institute. So with your going to Roger Williams and taking the helm, what do you envision? I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you've had discussions of, what, you'd like to sort of tackle first, again, to get that information out there to leaders in the state to really get a sense of where the needs are in the community.
Absolutely. So I think the first step that we want to take, and by I say we, not only myself, but the advisory board and the university, is to really look at our strategic plan and our mission and our vision as to what is needed in our community. And we want to get there, hopefully, not only by having partners at the table, but most importantly, having community members. Many times, policy and research organizations, we speak for people rather than having those people at the table. So we are, at least myself, I'm really looking forward to having these conversations with individuals in our community of how can the Policy Institute better reflect your needs and and these amazing reports that are looked at by stakeholders, and how can we grow from that?
It was interesting, the conversation, the debate last night here in Providence pertaining to the Fane Tower. Councilwoman Mary Kay Harris, when she was making her vote, did talk about how this issue really shines a light on affordable housing and how it hadn't really been tackled at the city level, needs to be tackled at the state level. Would you say that's one of the top issues that needs to be addressed?
I think so. The Latino Policy Institute has done research reports in the past with our partner the Housing Works right next door. And I think that that's an important report to visit once again. As we've seen year after every year, housing is a really big issue. But for the Latino community, we are disproportionately affected by this, not only with homeownership but rental. And so I think that in homelessness, right? And so I think this is something important to tackle and to strategically think about how can we impact it, not just in the city of Providence, but also back in our communities and in the entire state.
So affordable housing issues clearly tops. Let's talk education.
Yes.
Okay. We did just see the release of the RICA scores. Now, the first year that Rhode Island took this comprehensive assessment system. And it was very interesting when I had Neil Steinberg in from the Rhode Island Foundation, who's convening this group of stakeholders to look at how to improve. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh, Massachusetts is this, the golden unicorn, if you will." But he pointed out achievement gaps still persist and exist in Massachusetts. He said they're just at an upper level. So he said they're very aware. They're not resting on their laurels because there are communities of students that need to be addressed. Let's talk a little bit about that and the role of the Latino Policy Institute in looking at how to address the needs of Latinx students here in the state.
Correct. And I think the major thing that, aside from what Mr. Steinberg said, is the fact that for decades the state of Massachusetts has still been investing in education at different levels, and our state has not done that. It has not done that for ELL learners and for different people in our communities. So I think an actual investment not only in funding but in other types of resources, professional resources, parental resources, student-centered learning, like these are important things in order to really positively affect our students. So I think that's, and the Latino Policy Institute has done research regarding this. So, and I really look forward to doing this again in partnership with great organizations and districts who are at the forefront of this work every day.
And let's talk not from Rhode Island, but just nationally. Your predecessor very involved with national issues because we know that federal issues, especially pertaining to immigration, impact Rhode Islanders and families that are here. Do you envision that being a big piece of your position now heading up the Latino Policy Institute?
I think it could be. Again, the Latino community is not monolithic, right? We are, depending on your generation, depending on where you come from, really, in Latin America, our issues can be different. And so I think immigration is an incredibly important issue that we have to discuss and have at the forefront, just like education. But at the same time, like I mentioned, I want to ensure that when we are strategically planning what we want to focus on, we are keeping different parts of our Latino community in mind, and not just, like it's so many times told to us that we just focus on this one thing, like all Latinos care about X or Y or Z. We're not just one big blob. And so I think that's important to keep in mind.
Well, I wanted to have you in here, introduce you to folks, because I can only imagine once the new year rolls around and I get these reports out, we'll be inviting you back in to talk about your findings. Imagine I'll be seeing you up at the State House a little bit as well.
Hopefully, we'll see.
As you're advocating for issues that come forth as well. Anything else you want to share with folks while we have you here in studio?
No, this is exciting. Thank you for inviting me. This is my first time. And I want to invite not only you, but every other person listening to be more involved with the Latino Policy Institute. Like I said, your opinion and whatever your professional background is will be incredibly important to the work that we will be doing within the next few years. And I'm happy to hear from people, and once the new year rolls around, I'll have a lot of coffees with people so we can pick each other's brains.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come in here. Again, Marcela Betancourt, the new director of the Latino Policy Institute at Roger Williams University. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our last guest here for the Friday Noontime Show. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the Friday Noontime Show, bringing you the news from this week and the news from yesterday. I'd like to welcome in Raul Figueroa with Fuerza Laboral. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A new workers' cooperative announcement was put forth this week in Central Falls, the new Healthy Planet Cleaning Cooperative. And this is the first new workers' cooperative under state law. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how this got all the stakeholders to the table, and tell us more about the cooperative.
Sure, of course. I've been organizer for the past 2.5 years with Fuerza since May of 2016. When I joined Fuerza, one of the things that brought me to the to organizing is the a lot of problems that a lot of the workers, low wage workers, underground workers faces in many industries. I've worked in many industries in the past, so I know I have been victim of some of those violations in the past. But Fuerza Laboral is a workers' rights organization, but we consider ourselves a multi-issue organization. A lot of the times, the people who come looking for help, whether it's for wage theft or any type of discrimination, any type of labor violation, what happened was that a lot of the times we were able to help them, but then they would go back to the same industry would have been exploited in the past. So we weren't really creating a solution. So the only way that we thought that we would be able to give a permanent solution for these workers was through workers' cooperatives.
And so let's talk a little bit about that, the Healthy Planet Cleaning Cooperative. I mean, let's talk about what that looks like from nuts and bolts. As you said, the workers came together, probably said, here's our needs for both the community, our health, our work life. So talk about how this came to, like, who was around the table and said, this is what we need to do.
So Fuerza Laboral is the one who got the a grant. This was in 2014, and just to start doing the implementation, just the planning for the project, it has taken us 4 years to get to this point, and because we focus a lot on education part, there was a lot of stigma when you talk about workers' cooperatives associated with other bad ideas. But workers' cooperatives, in the way we see it, is an opportunity for the workers to own the work that they do. So the workers came to us with an idea, with an experience, with the desire to create their own business and own it, to work and own it. And once they came on board and they told us, we'll learn a little more about their experience and how. So then we decided, okay, so why don't a group of you decide to form this cooperative, and that way you are responsible in owning your own work.
And so let's talk a little bit about what that might look like. Again, with the Healthy Planet Cleaning Cooperative. So just workers for hire in any number of industries. I mean, where the particular focus area?
So we decided to start with the cleaning co-op because it was the first one under this new law. So we thought it was going to be a little easier in terms of permit, because in reality it's a business. It's still a business, and it's still abide through all the laws, tax laws, and permits and everything else that you need to run a business successfully. The only difference here is that there's not one person in charge for everybody else. Everybody who's on the table, everybody who's a worker there has a vote, and everybody has decision-making powers for the business.
And so the kickoff was this week in Central Falls, but tell me what the reaction's been like. Who have you heard from around the state? Who have you heard from around the country?
Yeah, so we so it's interesting because when we first tried to enact this law and trying to work in the legislation, this people and organizations and individuals who came together, people that we never really came across before, but they learned that this was a new idea, a new proposal, and ever since then we have been able to cultivate so many good relationships, and here in the in Rhode Island, in New England in general, and then on last year we were invited to go to the Workers Cooperative. People of color workers cooperatives and do and present the work that we did and how we were able to move the legislation along. We were in California this September, learning on how cooperatives are being formed there and what are the needs and people in the community there, and then gathering all that information, we're trying to bring it here and trying to do education. This has been our focus this past year, trying to educate and make sure that we targeting responsible consumers to
know that the cooperatives, because that's the other side of the coin, is that you need the consumer to know, here's this opportunity to support this effort here. Yeah. And so, you're an organizer through and through, and so when you were looking, on the policy side of this, advocating for it up at the State House, what does 2019 look like? What are the needs both, politically, now that this has been formed, and then is there opportunity for other cooperatives as well, or is the focus really making sure this one gets off the ground? I mean, you've probably got a lot of balls in the air.
But this is our focus for right now. We want to make sure that this cooperative is successful. We want to make sure that we have enough. They have enough business. We want to make sure that they also grow so they can give the opportunity to other members to join the cooperative, because there's no limit of how big a cooperative can be. But for 2019, I think one of the things that we have been discussing and talking to a lot of other business owners is that there's a lot of people who are looking to retire. Like think about it, maybe like your favorite shop where you bring your car. It's businesses that have been in the community for so long, and then you trust those businesses because you know that you know the person, you know the workers there. But now these people might want to retire, and their children might not want to continue with the family businesses. Times have changed, generations have changed. So how a business owner who's looking to retire has the opportunity to transform that business into a business, into a workers cooperative, and give the opportunity for their workers to form that cooperative. And that way you will make sure that every time you go there, bring your car there, and you're going to make sure you're going to know that you're going to get the same services that you got in the past.
No, I know that had been a discussion topic last year up at the General Assembly as well. Does that require separate legislation to be enacted to allow it to happen?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So I told Marcella, I'm sure I'll see her up there. I'm sure I'll see you up there as well.
Absolutely.
But anything else you want folks to know about the cooperative while we have you here in studio?
Well, if you're looking to have a business, I know a lot of businesses, a lot of companies, or a lot of families are having their Christmas celebration this year. If you don't want to deal with the cleaning prior and after that, consider hiring a Healthy Planet Cleaning Co-op and take that load off your back.
Had to make the plug for it. We'll make sure we have the links for it up as well when you watch this after the fact. But Rahul, I really appreciate your taking the time to come into the studio here. And you know what? That just about wraps up the Friday Noon and Politics show here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be back on Monday with Business Monday with Josh Fenton. But in the meantime, be sure to read GoLocalProv.com and catch us on Facebook. Have a great weekend. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.